Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for being here. So, my name is Dr. Sidney Cohen, also known as Dr. Sid. A little bit of background. I'm a psychologist. I've been in private practice in Cherry Hill, New Jersey for, 37 years. I've also written a couple of books, one of which is called Your Self-Sabotaging Inner Bully, Standing Up to It Once and for all about issues around self-sabotage. You can, I'm sure, tell from the title. And the other one is called Inner Blocks to Losing Weight, Why You Lose the Battle More Than the Weight, which is also really about self-sabotage, but focused mainly on sabotaging attempts to lose weight. I've also hosted an internet TV show called Heading in the Right Direction. And I have a website of Dr. Sid Speaks that makes reference to some previous webinars I've given. Co-hosted some of them on relationships, one also on weight loss and nutrition. So, as for tonight's webinar on do's and don'ts of dating and relationships, there are going to be 3 topics, and I have hosted segments on all of these topics before on my internet TV show, made guest appearances on all 3 topics. I also want to mention as part of my introduction that tonight's discussion, tonight's webinar is, as I see it, really relevant whether you're in the early stage of a relationship, just dating or beginning to date, or in a longer term ongoing relationship. So keep that in mind. My plan, I'd say, is to kind of be fluid about this. Probably going to talk on each segment, each of the 3 topics, for about maybe 10, 15 minutes, and then throw it open to questions and comments. If that doesn't go long, or if it goes as long as it does, I'll then get to the next topic and do the same thing for all 3 topics. If there are only a few questions along the way and comments, maybe this won't go 90 minutes, but we'll see how everything goes, keeping options open here. And I also want to make sure to mention that the video will be available within the next few days after this webinar. And I will make myself available for sure for DMs or emails if you have any questions or comments and just for whatever reason would prefer to hold off and do it more in a private manner. Okay, so topic number 1, red flags. And a couple of topics under that heading of levels of tolerableness. So let's start with, we all know the term red flag, but I want to tell you how I'm using the term. So there's a definition of red flag that I use that is the one I'm going to throw out right here. Defining a red flag as anything about a person you're in a relationship with that's just not easy to live with, not easy to deal with. Now, I'm going to use that definition. I'm going to sort of create some different categories. And one of the things I love to do is create categories. So first category I'm going to focus on is to make a distinction in terms of that definition of red flags between what I'm going to call the extremes of red flags versus red flags that aren't as extreme but can still be a significant issue you can have about a partner or a relationship. So what do I mean by extremes? By extremes, I'm talking about what I think it's safe to say would be big red flags for almost anyone, like abuse, severe neglect, periods of abandonment, pathological lying, and someone who has an addiction problem that they're clearly in denial about and not doing it about. Safe to say, those are going to be red flags, and big red flags for anyone. Okay, but short of those, and where I really want to now go with this, is to talk about what I'm thinking of as under the heading really of different strokes for different folks. The kind of red flags that may for one person be a red flag and not necessarily for someone else. And under that heading, I'm going to also make a distinction here between what I'm going to call the levels of tolerableness of a particular red flag. Now, little aside to that. And by the way, please feel free at any point, jot a couple of notes down if you do want to, at any point, again, make note and ask me a question or comment at some point. Okay, so a little aside, how I even got started with the idea of the tolerableness theme. So I was in a session one day with a patient, and they said something that I think we all say at one time or another. I have to learn to accept. And they were talking about a particular person, could be about a particular situation. Have to learn to accept. Well, it kind of struck me. The word accept is not what we really mean at that moment. I mean, we use the word, it is in that statement. But I'm going to propose that the word we really mean when we say something like, I have to learn to accept, stay in the relationship or the situation, is the word tolerate. I have to learn to tolerate, because I think a key distinction between accepting and tolerating is if you can genuinely accept someone as they are, you're really okay with who they are and what even may be some red flags. Whereas if you're not really okay with the person with having those particular red flags, then I would say we're talking more figuring out how to tolerate it, whether it's tolerate them, tolerate the red flags. It's not really a matter of acceptance. Or to put it just slightly differently, as it occurred to me also, if we're talking acceptance, we're talking about feeling that you are resolved about any red flags that may be there. Whereas if we're talking tolerate, you're kind of resigned to that red flag, assuming that it is a red flag that's tolerable. Okay. Let me give some examples now of what I mean by red flags that aren't extremes. But again, the key here is under the heading of different strokes for different folks. So, for example, I'm going to give a little list that occurred to me, and you may feel it's somewhat relevant to you. You may feel it's not relevant to you. You may have some other things hit you as I'm going through the list. And again, this is just a list of some examples of what could be a red flag for someone in a relationship. Someone, for example, who has one drink a night. Somebody who has occasional temper outbursts, not necessarily on a frequent basis, but on occasion. Somebody who is perceived as being excessive in their spending habits, or for that matter, in their savings habits. Someone who has the trait or quality of being inconsistent in terms of their self-discipline and their lifestyle. Somebody who is so very outgoing and charming that it almost seems like they tend to be a little bit too flirtatious. Or someone who's the opposite, somebody who's really socially anxious and tends to be really uncomfortable in social situations. Or someone who's somewhat overweight. Again, moral of the story is these are examples of what in a relationship you can feel are a red flag for you about your partner. However, let me now get to the idea of tolerableness. So this is not something that I want to think of or have anyone look at as a black and white. It's either a red flag or it's not, which is the tendency we all have to say, oh, that's a red flag. Oh, okay, that's not a red flag. So I want to create a gray area here, and that's where I bring in the idea of the 3 levels of tolerableness. So any red flag can have 3 levels. First level is, I'm going to call it tolerable. So this is a red flag about someone that, again, by the definition, you're not thrilled it's there, kind of wish it wasn't, but it overall feels, okay, I can tolerate it. I can live with this red flag, okay? But now we're going to take it down a notch. Now we're going to talk barely tolerable. So barely tolerable feeling comes in when there's a red flag that you're identifying, maybe more than one, we'll just go one at a time for now. And what you're feeling is kind of like you're straddling the fence. So one foot's on the side of the fence, oh yeah, I can tolerate it. But the other foot is on the side of the fence saying, no, I really can't. But you feel overall it kind of balances out. So I'm calling that balancing out point, feeling barely tolerable. That's a red flag that's really tough to live with, but it still feels the barely part is still kind of winning out a bit, as opposed to now take it down to the low point. And that I'm going to call outright intolerable. And at that point, both feet are on the same side of the fence, meaning that red flag isn't tolerable, it isn't barely tolerable, it is outright intolerable. And at that point, you are clear that this is a red flag that is simply intolerable to you. And that's that, you would think. However, it is not where I'm going to leave this. Now, I'm going to sidetrack just a little bit. because there's something I'm realizing right now. I want to be sure to make a point about, and then I'll get to dealing with what happens when there's an intolerable red flag, and I will get to that. What I want to do first is talk a little bit right now, something about what about red flags at the beginning of a relationship, okay? So as I'm thinking about it, what I've been addressing so far are red flags that certainly can come up early in a relationship, but really can come up at any point. But what I want to especially get at now is at the beginning of a relationship, the very beginning stage. And what I want to talk about here, back to my use of categories, is a distinction I want to make between what I'm going to call hypervigilance versus non-vigilance versus vigilance. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Let me start with hypervigilance. If you're at a very early stage in a relationship, maybe you've only met the person even just once or twice, okay? If you're in what I'm calling hypervigilant mode, what that mainly means is that whether you consciously realize it or not, whether you're intending to or not, you are very quick to judge, very quick to define something about this other person as a big red flag. And certainly it could be even more than one of those that you're defining immediately as basically a barely tolerable, if not an intolerable red flag. Now, if that's where you're at in this hypervigilant mode, I kind of think of it as an inner radar. And if you're in hypervigilant mode, your radar is blipping all over the place. This one particular behavior, this one particular sign of what somebody's saying or doing, again, already an intolerable red flag. Well, there are some explanations, though, for why you may be in hypervigilant mode if that happens to be the mode you're in, such as you're feeling you have a history of being burned in a relationship recently, being burned at some point down the road. So now you are entering the next relationship or pursuing the next relationship. You're going to be hypervigilant, or at least you're vulnerable to be. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that you're a perfectionist and you are looking for somebody who basically is perfect, or at least that's what you got yourself convinced of. So you're going to be hypervigilant because you're looking for the slightest flaw and the slightest imperfection. And another possibility, frankly, is that you are basically a narcissist who is very caught up in how terrific you are, and therefore the slightest flaw in somebody else almost isn't worthy of you, okay? So that's what I mean by hypervigilance about red flags. Now I'm going to sort of go to the opposite extreme, and I'm going to call that being non-vigilant. Well, what does non-vigilant mean? It basically means there's an analogy I heard a long time ago. It's called the ostrich effect. And that's where you do tend to put your head in the sand and not see what really may be what for you is a red flag, much less more than one. So why might you be inclined to kind of play ostrich a bit, where on your radar screen, there may even be blips, but you're not seeing them, or there's just, no blips at all going off. Well, typically what I find is that reflects a vulnerability, a significant vulnerability to feeling being too needy, being desperate. And so if that's the case, you are not really going to be looking for what are red flags that really would be worth looking for. Not to automatically define as intolerable, not to automatically rule the person out, but at least to have those radar blips going off in a way that's in your best interest, to get you at least to be looking at the possibility that this is a red flag that could be something that really might end up intolerable. So that's the non-vigilant category. And then we get to the healthiest category of all, which is being vigilant, which is basically, yes, it is human nature when you're first getting to meet somebody to look for what may be a red flag or two. However, the key to vigilance, as opposed to being hypervigilant or the other extreme again of non-vigilant, is that what you're willing to do is you're willing to give some benefit of the doubt. If there is something that jumps out at you, okay, it's registered, there's some radar blips going off, but There may be immediately also some qualities you see in this person that are really appealing, that seem on first impression to be the kind of qualities that actually you're very drawn to. So if that's the case, then if you're not in hypervigilant mode and you're not in non-vigilant mode, you can maintain a kind of more balanced perspective. Okay, a little bit of your guard up, that's human, and yet not allowing yourself to automatically put your whole guard up because you're keeping an open mind. You're seeing some things that warrant keeping an open mind. Okay, so actually, let me give a couple examples of what I mean there by some positive qualities that you're getting on first impression that can make you want to just keep perspective on some of any of the red flags that are also giving you, a little bit of agita and getting those blips to start. So for example, let's say pretty quickly, see the person is a really good communicator. You get the impression pretty quickly they have really good values. You get the impression they're committed to personal growth. They talk about their past relationships, at least a couple of relationships, and you get the impression, they have pretty healthy history, good relationship history. And maybe there's some things that are said in discussion or conversation where you get the impression, aha, this is somebody who seems to know how to take accountability. And I don't know about you, but as a quick aside, in this day and age, I find that there are enough people, it's not just my professional experience by any means, in my personal life, I have found that the issue of accountability, well, all I can say is I can give a whole webinar on just the subject of taking accountability, which enough people in this world, it seems to me, don't. So if you're getting to know someone and whatever it is they say and whatever it is they're doing, you get this sense, you know what, there's somebody willing to take accountability. That's a real draw. And there's no question in my mind that it should be a real draw. Okay, back to levels of tolerableness and red flags. And what I now want to switch to is the issue of, and now moving off initial stage and dating into being in a more ongoing relationship. So one of the big issues that I find comes up, I most certainly have had the personal experience myself of the subject I'm now about to get into, which is, red flags, they're barely tolerable at best, if not intolerable at worst, but you stay around anyway. You stay anyway. Okay? God knows, been there, done that. And it felt, in the long run, very costly. Well, I think most people have been in that kind of sinking boat at one time or another, but they stayed in the boat. And they stayed for a really long time, maybe. Longer than you would have ever maybe believed that you would have stayed. And how did you stay? Well, you probably convinced yourself that the good out somehow still felt like it outweighed the bad. Or also maybe you just knew you really, you didn't really want to be alone, but I'm going to get to that in a moment. But what also can certainly feed staying too long, especially again in the face of at least one intolerable red flag, is that you're just being real insecure and feeling real insecure. Your self-worth, your self-esteem is just not in a good place, and not therefore feeling very confident about yourself in terms of somebody else that could be better for you or would be really interested in you. Okay? But here's the key. The key, in my opinion, of staying too long is one 5-letter word, and that word is the word needs. Needs. Needs like companionship, not be alone. Could sometimes be financial needs. If there's kids involved, it could be issues around kids. Could be needs for sexual excitement if sexually things have been really good. And it can also sometimes be the need to not hurt the other person because you're all caught up in feeling guilty. Needs can keep us in relationships a lot longer than really we may have thought or may have been in our best interest. Very, very real issue. And we all need to be honest with ourselves about staying around too long because of needs. Okay, last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to throw it open if there are any questions or comments before I move on to the second subject of this webinar, is one thing I want to be sure to emphasize that we can all lose sight of. whether it's the beginning stage of a relationship and question of red flags is coming up, or some point down the road. We can certainly be, maybe it's hypervigilant, maybe it's non-vigilant, maybe it's just appropriately vigilant. Point is, that's a two-way street. And we can lose sight of that. It's a two-way street, meaning the other person, either that we're getting to know or we're in this long-term relationship with, hey, they're checking us out. They're looking for red flags about us. Now, if you stop to think about it for a moment, well, that seems pretty obvious, right? Well, may not be obvious at all in the moment, especially when you're first getting to know someone, but certainly even ongoingly. If you're just getting to know someone, of course, odds are you're not going to have any clue at all as to what it is. Their radar screen is already blipping away a bit. But if it's a longer-term relationship already in place, and perhaps your partner has let you know, or maybe they've avoided letting you know, which of course wouldn't be very healthy, just as it wouldn't be very healthy for you to not let them know what's a big red flag for you. So just keep in mind, it is a two-way street. And what we bring to the table is what they're looking at, not just what they bring to the table that we're looking at. Okay, so let me take a moment before topic number 2 of chemistry. Any questions or comments? Okay, so again, please feel free. DMs on Instagram, send me an email, anything. If for any reason you're hesitating right now, I guarantee you that I will respond. Okay, so I'm going to move now to the second topic. The topic is chemistry and what chemistry is really about. Okay, so as I did with the first topic, I am also on this topic going to do some categorizing, put some things into categories. So first one I'm going to go with as a category in relation to chemistry, as I was dealing with red flags, is a distinction of category between surface chemistry and deeper layered chemistry. Okay, so let's start with surface. What I mainly mean by surface or external is good old physical appearance. But what I want to do with that is, as obvious as that is to all of us, that it's reality. It's a piece of chemistry. But what I want to do is sort of break it down a little bit. Again, categories. So this is kind of an arbitrary way of looking at it. But this is what I'm going to put out there. So I'm creating 4 categories here: great, good, fair, and none. Okay? So I don't think I need to explain great chemistry a whole lot. You are just very physically attracted to this person. Need I say more? It's a little more nuanced, though, when we start getting to even the category, I'm going to call it good. Okay? You're feeling a good amount of attraction, but it's not great. So there's different ways to go with that. Now, if you're caught up in perfectionism, and it has to either be the chemistry is great immediately or very quickly, then good, call it like it is. The odds are you're going to feel that good isn't good enough. And if you are perfectionistic like that, well, you got yourself pretty much in a black and white hole there. If chemistry isn't great, you're not going to give this person a chance. As opposed to if the physical chemistry feels good, and here's the key, and you are open-minded to, guess what, getting to know the rest of what the person is on the inside. I know from personal experience, I have been in relationships where the great physical chemistry was there quickly, and oh my God, then I discovered enough about the person that they were not only no longer great physical, didn't feel great physical chemistry, but there was almost an ugliness after a while. It's tricky. It's very tricky to just get so drawn by great physical appearance. On the other hand, If there's good, there's at least some, and it's pretty good, and you get to know this person, you can discover you got yourself one real special person here. And then with that, the whole sense of physical chemistry can end up being great. It's really a matter of being open-minded. But now I'll take it down one little bit of a notch, where it feels like the physical chemistry is, I'll call it fair. It's not great, certainly. You don't even necessarily feel it's good, but it's fair. It's at least some. Well, odds are there it's going to be tougher to really want to give this person a chance, unless, and I'm going to say it again, being really open-minded. Really being open-minded, not being so caught up in that external or physical appearance. And again, looking for some special traits, some special qualities under the heading of non-physical chemistry, which I'm going to get to in a moment. Last but not least, if you know that the answer to the question, is there any physical chemistry at all here, that the answer is none, it's none. And that's that. You know that, and I know that. So I'm not going to belabor the point. Okay, so I want to get to, in a moment, non-physical appearance chemistry. I just want to sort of throw in one editorial here. I think it's important. I think men tend to be guiltier of this than women, but really can ultimately be both genders. When you're determining how much you're really getting caught up in physical appearance as the key to chemistry, be careful also, it can sometimes get clouded by some ego issues. Ego, status, kind of the trophy thing, which really, when, I think you realize the older you get especially, that kind of stuff really, if you truly, and I mean truly, want to be in a great relationship, you got to get past that stuff, okay? If not, you're going to stay stuck, and you're going to limit yourself to that perfectionism, great physical chemistry standard, and good luck in really having a happy, healthy relationship over the long haul. Okay, so enough on that. So what I want to talk about now is what non-physical chemistry is all about, non-physical appearance chemistry. And what I'm really going to get at here is two things, and they go together typically. One is personality, and the other is the true quality of the person. Okay, the deeper stuff, the key stuff, the heart and soul stuff. And what I would like to do really is, I'm going to go ahead and do is give you a list of some of those kind of traits and qualities. Some of these may be obvious, some of them may be some food for thought, some of them may be things you really just may want to consider and look at more. And this all, as with the issue that I was speaking about before, again, it goes with the idea of different strokes for different folks. Okay, that's going to be key here too. So, in no particular order, here are some traits and qualities about a person that you really want to look at as really counting for what chemistry is really all about. Okay, again, no particular order. Somebody who's outgoing, somebody who's funny and has a similar sense of humor to you, somebody who's intelligent, somebody who's a great communicator and listener, somebody who's compassionate, passionate, affectionate, they're ambitious, they're respectful, they know how to show you that you are special to them, they're hardworking, they have a really good job, key is that they're hardworking, they have good self-discipline, they're not excessive, they're not fanatical, they know how to prioritize being of service, working, doing something in the community. They're very loyal to their family, loyal to their friends. Financially secure. They don't have to be rich, but financially secure. They also could be something that is a real draw for you, is they're spiritual. Whatever spiritual means. Doesn't have to mean religious, but there's something in which they convey to you and they lead their life in a way that conveys a connection to spirituality. Another one for sure that I mentioned before is accountability. Very, very big issue, as I was talking about before and talking about red flags. And last, but God knows not least, part of what chemistry can really be about is discovering that this person has high level values, especially in terms of honesty, integrity, and trustworthiness. No one on this planet, obviously, has all of these. Not a whole lot of people on this planet may even have a lot of these. But that doesn't matter. It's not at all here. As I'm sure you realize, I'm not talking quantity of these kind of traits and qualities. I'm talking about quality. I'm talking about you being totally honest with yourself. All of this requires being totally honest with yourself. Which of these qualities about this person you're getting to know are qualities that really matter to you, that are really appealing to you? And that when you see the evidence as you keep being together, spending time together, see how they are with other people, the more you see that there are at least some of these qualities that really matter to you. Maybe it really matters to you that they really are intelligent. It really matters to you that they're passionate. It really matters to you that they do community service. It really matters to you that they're spiritual. These are the things that need to matter if you really want a level of chemistry that can be the deepest kind of chemistry you can have, where it definitely goes deeper than physical appearance. And even again, lift up any feelings that you may have where the level of physical attraction isn't quite where you want it to be. This can take that and multiply it by 5, 10 times. This is what real chemistry is about. And I would like to just say, on a very personal note, I'm no youngster anymore here. I have a birthday coming up. I'm not telling you which one it is, but I'm in my 60s, and it took me a very, very long time to find what I have finally found as the level of chemistry that, sometimes I thought I came close, but no, didn't have, finally have. And it really, as much as anything, took. It doesn't matter how old you are. You can be, in your 20s, in your 30s, your 50s, 60s, whatever. It takes reaching a point, but also knowing you really want the best relationship you can have. And you're also feeling real good about, like I said before, in terms of the whole issue of red flags, you're feeling real good about what you bring to the table too. That's the best of chemistry. Okay, one more thing. I do want to say something about sexual chemistry. If you know that your ability to experience true sexual chemistry is very highly dependent on physical appearance, okay, then that's who you are. If that's who you are, then, hey, won't take a psychologist to figure out you're going to need to feel a very strong physical attraction. However, if it's not crucial to you, again, there's obviously at least some physical attraction. Well, there is still room for sexual chemistry to be really good if you are experiencing, again, the quality of the person. The quality of the person can make, not just for more appealing person in general, it can make for more sexual appeal. And then maybe throw in some things about on a purely sexual level. The style of lovemaking a person has, are they responsive? Do they touch you in a way, literally and figuratively, where physical appearance in those kind of moments can become pretty darn irrelevant or awfully close to it. Again, this is the whole package of what true chemistry is really about. And God bless anyone who finds it, as I know it is an incredible blessing. If you have it, you know it. If you haven't found it, I hope and wish that if you just hang in there, you'll find somebody that you can reach that point with. I wish that on everyone. So, very last but not least, before I throw this part open, any questions or comments? If you really want to have the truest chemistry you can have, then I guess I'm kind of saying it, maybe just a little bit of a rehash. You want the percentage of personality and quality-based chemistry to always be the higher percentage than the physical and the sexual. The physical and the sexual needs to be there, yes, but make the percentage of personality and quality-based person be the key to the chemistry. Okay. Questions or comments, if any, for the moment? Okay, it could be a bit of a shy audience, but again, please, DMs, please emails. Okay, let me just check the time. All right, well, certainly aren't going to go 90 minutes, but hey, no law says we had to. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get to the third topic. And this is the topic of unhealed psychological and emotional wounds. Which, first thing I want to say, you may not even be conscious of. I mean, odds are you are, but I've seen instances over the years where people aren't necessarily even fully conscious of the wounds that they may actually still be unhealed from. And certainly healing is a big part of where I want to go with this. All right, so what do I mean by psychological or emotional wounds? Well, a couple of categories I think here we'd all agree are the kind of categories that we put under the heading of emotional and psychological wounds. Certainly betrayal. And before I go further, I just want to make sure I give you the definition I use of betrayal, because it's easy to just limit the definition of betrayal to some kind of infidelity or cheating. But that's not the only definition that I think applies to the word betrayal. So here's the definition of betrayal that I use. Any significant feeling of letdown by someone important to you, based on what you believe you had the right to believe they would never do to you. If you use that definition, you are not limiting the definition of betrayal to infidelity, because it is very possible with that definition to feel betrayed, and the person may have been totally monogamous. They may be somebody who would say and did say and showed in their actions they never cheat. Well, guess what? That's great. That certainly counts. But it's not the only way to feel betrayed if you use this definition. And I cannot recommend enough use this definition of betrayal. Okay? Other wounds, certainly rejection. Feeling rejection is obviously a wound, and it can be a big, hard one to heal from. But then there's others. It can be wounding to feel that there's been a pattern of neglect shown to you. God knows it certainly can be a deep wound if you're outright abandoned. I also want to be sure to say, and those are some of the key wounds, that I'm talking here about two possible categories of wounds. It could be wounds from a previous relationship, a recent one, or by no means does it have to be a recent one. We all can have unhealed wounds from a relationship that could be years ago, many years ago. But when I talk about unhealed wounds, I'm certainly also talking about unhealed wounds from childhood. That can be there, if not consciously, then deep down, hell, for a lifetime. And that's all there is to it. And then if you are wounded in a very significant long-term relationship, it's kind of double trouble, because you may still not have healed even from childhood wounds. Okay. I want to now use a term. I want to throw a term into the mix for instances in which these wounds are so deep that you can still function some, sure, but they really are having a significant impact on your day-to-day functioning in life. Whether it's in terms of being able to really concentrate, have fun, do the kinds of things that really are kind of normal levels of functioning. Because one of the things that you need to face and you need to know about deep, unhealed emotional and psychological wounds is that they can be manifested as symptoms of PTSI. And I want to immediately tell you what I mean by the I. Okay? I assume everyone knows PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. You may also know that we in the mental health field are really only supposed to diagnose PTSD when there's been a life and death trauma, natural disaster, being in war, etc. Well, to give full credit where credit is due, as I always do at a moment like this, there is a psychologist by the name of Peter Levine, and God bless Peter Levine. He's just done some absolutely fantastic things in the field of trauma. And my favorite thing is in a book he wrote. And in this particular book, he talks about a term, and it's called post-traumatic stress injury. And in this book about unhealed wounds and trauma, Peter Levine quotes a patient who talked about how much he feels he doesn't want to be thought of as having a disorder. All his post-traumatic stress, he was looking at as he was injured. He was physically injured too, but we're just staying with the psychological piece right now. He was injured. And so Peter Levine talks about post-traumatic stress injury, and I have been quoting him ever since. These kind of emotional and psychological wounds, when they're deep, when they last, when they persist, when they affect you, that's post-traumatic stress injury. And to me, it's the term that needs to be used. It's the term that is appropriate. So, PTSI, got it on the table. All right, so let's go from there. I want to talk a little bit now about how these wounds, these various kinds of unhealed wounds, can manifest behaviorally and attitudinally. And the distinction I want to make here is something that struck me one day as a distinction between, I'm going to call it acting in versus acting out. Okay, what do I mean by acting in? Well, if you are dealing with significant unhealed wounds, deep-seated wounds, acting in means that in your PTSI, you are tending to be avoidant, emotionally walled off, your self-worth and your self-esteem is down, your mistrust, certainly if part of the wound is betrayal, your mistrust level is very high. Acting in means you're taking that pain, that wound mainly, and pushing it in towards, and it can be to a degree, against yourself. So that is one way, one form of PTSI in terms of coping with wounds, but there is another one. And this other one may not look the least bit in ways like PTSI, or again, as I'm calling it, acting in, and that's acting out. So what do I mean by acting out in the face of unhealed emotional or psychological wounds? What acting out means basically is an attitude of bitterness and entitlement. Basically, if you're deeply wounded, but the opposite of acting in, the opposite of essentially taking it out on yourself and being avoidant and walling yourself off, is coming out on the attack. And that's what bitterness is about. That attitude of acting out is basically going to come across, whether the person who's acting out consciously intends it or not, it can come across as, you owe me. You, the next person, or whoever it's going to be, you owe me. I feel entitled to be essentially compensated for by how badly screwed over I was. Be it in a recent relationship, be it all the way back to childhood. That's when the wounds have festered. And they have festered in a direction that steers you in much more into anger than hurt. You're still hurt. There's still hurt in there. But in the acting in category, you're much more caught up in the hurt and not perhaps anywhere as much as you could or should legitimately and humanly be caught up in about also feeling angry. Well, again, in the acting out category, anger is in control. And as long as that anger stays in control and you don't really do anything much about it, you don't work on it, you don't acknowledge it, you just kind of let it control you, you have a very good chance of becoming bitter, or at least certainly appearing that way. And if you don't think you are, but you still appear that way, well, guess what? You are going to be perceived that way. And you are going to be perceived as being very entitled and probably also being perceived as narcissistic. The world owes me. That's the acting out version of unhealed wounds. And there's something they both share in common, though. And you may realize it based on what I'm saying, but let's get it on the table. Both are going to lead to sabotage. You are vulnerable to sabotaging relationships. The next relationship you're in, even other relationships. If you're caught up either in acting in the face of unhealed wounds, or caught up in acting out, either way, same result. And if you're caught up more in the acting in category, you're then much more vulnerable to acting in even more. Because if you're in acting in mode and you're already feeling hurt and you're already avoiding, your self-esteem is down, and then you bring that into your next relationship, call it like it is. The odds are not great for you that you're going to have a healthy relationship, that you're really going to be seen as real appealing, because you haven't dealt with how hurt you are. You haven't dealt with the acting in piece. And so you're more likely to sabotage yourself because you're more vulnerable to appearing to be needy. I hate the word needy. I really hate it. But we all know that the word is used. So if you appear to be needy, you appear to be extra vulnerable, it's going to work against you. And that's really sad, but it is reality. Again, as opposed to if you're in the acting out category, you're not thinking about neediness, you're not thinking about vulnerability, you're only thinking about, again, here's what I'm owed. Okay, let me now get to how to try to heal from these wounds, especially, again, if you're in the acting in category. Because if you're in the acting out category, you may not be thinking a whole lot that you're even wounded, like basically I was saying. So if we're going to talk about healing from unhealed wounds, and we're going to really talk about, again, the acting in category, so I want to especially focus here, 2 categories. Last time I'll go with categories: self-healing and the optional of treatment healing. Okay, so what do I mean by self-healing? Self-healing to me means you create a little menu for yourself of things that for you are ways to heal. Like I said in the other 2 categories of red flags, the chemistry, everything, it's different strokes for different folks. One person works for, this person it doesn't work for. But under the heading of a self-healing menu, here's some examples, okay? What I think is first important is to create a little menu for yourself for ways to comfort yourself and soothe yourself. Different strokes, different folks. One person can be comforted and soothed by taking a warm bath. Another person, it could be listening to classical music. Another person, it could be taking a walk out in nature. Another person could be calling your close friend. We all can comfort and soothe ourselves differently, and it's a great part of self-healing. Next, something I call self-credit time. Little exercise, do at the end of the day. It's kind of a positive, affirming little exercise, where you look back on your day, and in a positive, affirming way, you just give yourself a little bit of acknowledgement for something you did that day that you felt was positive. Like something that took effort, something that took courage. You met some goal. Little things, nothing big. But it's not so little. When you think about it, it's something that makes you feel good. And it was something that you accomplished that day. Another thing is, I call it a self-esteem list. And a self-esteem list is a list of the likable, positive traits you see yourself having. So when you think of those positive traits or qualities, you can say to yourself, you know what? Here's what I like about myself. That's great to have a little list like that. Just, look at every day. Another way, certainly, for healing can be if you are into, again, I mentioned before, some kind of spiritual pursuit. Totally different strokes with different folks there. And if you choose to have, as part of your spirituality, something connected to God or higher power, okay, choose that. Go with that. If that's not for you, that's, of course, equally okay, because we all can define spiritual in different ways. And certainly, I think I basically mentioned it, what can certainly be part of self-healing is reach out. Reach out to someone, couple of people, whatever, whoever it is, that you trust, that you believe from experience, your evidence is they know how to be there for you because they get you and they get how to be comforting. There could be people in your life you're very fond of, but they either just don't quite get you or they don't quite get the best way that works for you for healing. So those are the people you have every reason to hesitate with. Oh, one other thing I almost forgot. For sure, as self-healing for some people absolutely is journaling. And a gratitude list. I almost forgot that one too. All can be part of self-healing. But certainly, and especially, if the depth of your wound is PTSI level, please, if you haven't already done it, haven't already considered it, keep yourself open to getting some therapy or counseling or join a support group even. Get outside help. Because if it is a wound level of PTSI, you really would do yourself a big favor to get that kind of help in the mix. Okay. One more time. Any questions or comments at the moment? Okay. Again, I'll third time say, DMs, emails, please don't hesitate. So we certainly are not going 90 minutes. We're going to go a little bit short, even to 60 minutes, but that's okay. Very last but not least, here's what I want to say, just to kind of overall sum it up. The number one thing you need to do is you need to be totally honest with yourself about all of these things. Total honesty with yourself. Okay? Red flags, be totally honest with yourself. Chemistry, be totally honest with yourself. Unhealed wounds, be totally honest with yourself. Don't deny, don't negate, don't downplay, don't avoid, because you're just setting yourself up to sabotage yourself if you're not totally honest with yourself. Again, I want to say, if you know you need help professionally, please reach out. And one last but not least thing I want to say about relationships. You know, what I've learned for enough years is in relationships, you really do need to have fun and games, literally speaking and figuratively, of course. But the best relationships in the world are the ones where you can heal from your wounds. The red flags, if there are any, will definitely be tolerable. And the chemistry is likely to be really darn good. What you need to be able to do is the work. We hear the word work. You got to work at a relationship. You got to do the work. Well, the word work sounds like who wants to do work. Well, I always tell my clients, and I really try to remind myself, here's what work means in a relationship. It's 5 C words. This is the work. 5 C words. Communication, compromise, courage, constructively challenge, and comfort. That's the work. Those 5 things. If you and your partner are committed and keep the commitment through thick and thin, through up and down, through fights, through the greatest lovemaking, through all shades of black, white, and gray, if you stay committed to the work on those 5 C words, you got a real good chance of a great foundation with lots of chemistry, with lots of healing, and again, with, at worst, tolerable red flags going both directions. So, thank you very, very much for tuning in. I really hope you found this helpful. And please don't hesitate to get in touch with me on my website, Dr. Sid Speaks, or on Instagram. I will get back to you, I promise you that. Thank you very much. Stop recording that.
still got you. You can close out of that screen.
Okay. It says, do I want to stop?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cancel. Oh, do I want to stop? The answer is
Yep.
yes.